Prime Minister Mia Mottley says Barbados is happy to host talks between Venezuela's government and the opposition and calls for a peaceful resolution. Senator for Colombia's FARC party, Jesus Santrich, failed to show up for a hearing at the Supreme Court, as many are concerned about his whereabouts. And a rescue ship saves more than 40 migrants, including children, adrift in the Mediterranean. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Talks between the Venezuelan government and the opposition are continuing for a second day in Barbados. The Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, says Barbados is happy to be able to facilitate this dialogue with the backing of the government of Norway.
Talking to local media, Prime Minister Mia Mottley said the government of Barbados, along with other CARICOM governments, are clear that the time for dialogue is never over. We would want to see a very peaceful resolution to the problems in Venezuela. She went on to say, we are aware of the humanitarian crisis and equally that you can't have intervention that is in breach of the Charter of the UN or OAS. And she asked the media not to chase after the Venezuelan negotiators. Let the people talk. Let the people be in peace. Don't go looking for them. The fact that they have chosen Barbados is a recognition that we can facilitate this kind of discussion without the kind of pressure that they may face elsewhere.
The Venezuelan government, of course, does not accept that the situation in Venezuela can be classified as a humanitarian crisis, as the opposition alleges. When the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, visited Caracas last month, and later, in reply to her report, the Foreign Minister Jorge Reaza and other government leaders made clear that U.S. sanctions and other economic measures against Venezuela are to blame for inflicting suffering on the people. As talks proceed in Barbados, many Venezuelans are waiting anxiously for the results, and most agree that any solution has to come from within the country. It cannot be imposed from abroad.
As always, the objective of the Venezuelan government is to strengthen its diplomacy for peace, while the White House continues to pursue its violent plans for Venezuela. Since 2013, there have been more than 600 calls for dialogue in a framework of reconciliation and respect for sovereignty. Now the talks are in Barbados, as the Minister of Communication announced in a communiqué posted on social media. According to this analyst, the new round of talks show the government's commitment to prevent intervention.
The Venezuelan right is a very bad investment for the United States. It is in every sense an opposition without solid social or political roots. It's completely discredited. It doesn't want dialogue. It has no project for the country. So if the US government has any sense, it should really engage in this dialogue.
Since January, there has been no let-up in the violent plans against Venezuela of the opposition and the international right wing. But President Nicolas Maduro has stuck to his insistence on talks.
We need to show the world that we need peace and calm, that we don't want any kind of war. The only war we face is the one imposed on us by the North American Empire.
As the government insists, the solution must be a Venezuelan one.
President Maduro has always been very clear about one thing, that we recognize the problems we have, but that we can solve them among ourselves as Venezuelans, that no foreign power should come and tell us what we should do, that we should choose our own destiny.
The Venezuelan people are waiting to see what comes of these talks in Barbados, while on the streets, they continue to show their support for the revolution.
90 Venezuelan migrants living in Ecuador are now homeward bound under the Return to the Homeland program. The initiative, promoted by the Bolivarian government of Nicolás Maduro, was started in 2018 and has so far provided 32 flights for Venezuelans wishing to return home. Close to 3,000 Venezuelan nationals have been repatriated since the program began. Xenophobia, unemployment, and sexual exploitation in foreign countries have motivated the return of these migrants to their homeland.
The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry has done good by those of us who need to return home. Me personally, I have spent 2 years by myself, without seeing my wife, without seeing my children and grandchildren. I have hope that I will find work in Venezuela. I have faith in this.
Former FARC combatant and current Senator Jesus Santrich failed to appear before the Supreme Court of Justice on Tuesday to testify for alleged drug trafficking charges in the U.S. Due to his absence, the Attorney General's office requested that the Supreme Court issue an arrest warrant against Santrich and that a new date be set for the hearing. Meanwhile, the FARC party expressed their rejection towards Santrich's absence, calling it a serious breach of the peace agreement. According to Santrich's lawyers, his whereabouts remain unknown, but added that his absence could be due to security reasons. He was last seen publicly a week ago during a news conference where he said he would work together with Colombian authorities to clear up his name.
As you all know, Jesus did not appear before the court. We do not know what the reasons are for his absence, but what we can say is that it's probably due to security reasons. His family has said they think he was kidnapped or forcibly disappeared. That is something that his family will have to make public in their own time. But the truth is he didn't appear before the court today. We have now requested a new date for this hearing.
The attorneys for fired U.S. police officer Amber Geiger have asked a judge to move her murder trial out of Dallas. They cite media hysteria surrounding Geiger's fatal shooting of St. Lucia's national Botham Jean. Last September, Geiger killed John inside his own apartment. She claimed to have mistaken his apartment for her own. She says she thought John, a 26-year-old accountant, was a burglar. For many people, this story has not added up, and now there are reported inconsistencies. Meanwhile, the judge has not yet responded to the recent request made by Geiger's attorneys. The trial is scheduled to start on September 23rd. Jury selection is slated to begin on September 6th, the one-year anniversary of John's death. Guyana's President David Granger has proposed the names of 8 nominees for the country's Elections Commission. The opposition and the government are meeting later on Tuesday to discuss the potential candidates. Among the nominees is retired Justice James Patterson, who recently resigned as Election Commission chairman. He did so after the CCJ ruled that the process, which resulted in his appointment, was flawed. A total of 19 nominees are up for the position, including 11 names resubmitted by the opposition leader. Antigua and Barbuda's government says it has received positive feedback to a proposal that would allow it to own at least 40% of the Scotiabank branch in Antigua. It's one of several Scotiabank branches in the Caribbean being acquired by the Trinidad and Tobago-based Republic Financial Holdings Limited. Prime Minister Gaston Brown says his administration had put 2 options on the table. One, that a consortium comprising his government and a group of domestic banks should be giving the first option to buy the Antigua Scotia branch. The second option is to partner with Republic Bank, and in that case, Antigua would take up to 40% of the shares. After a case lasting 20 years, a court in Italy has given life sentences to 24 former leaders of dictatorships in Latin America. They were found guilty of repressing dissent by any means necessary in Uruguay, Chile, Peru, and Bolivia.
An appeals court in Italy has condemned 24 former political and military leaders from South America to life imprisonment for murders committed during Operation Condor.
I think that the fact that the sentence was so strong, in this case life imprisonment, is a strong signal. I think that's how it should be, setting an example. After what those governments did during the dictatorship, these examples are important.
Those subject to a life sentence include 13 Uruguayans. Among them are Jorge Trocoli, who lived in Italy after fleeing from Uruguayan justice in 2007, and Pedro Mata, who is still a fugitive from justice. The other Uruguayans are already serving sentences for crimes against humanity.
Others and families of the members of the detained and disappeared people, this is a very emotional day. They had hopes, but not so much, because the first ruling had only condemned some of the commanders. So this justice is not only for those people, but for all of those who were involved.
After the verdict was announced, human rights organizations here in Uruguay held a video conference with the lawyers in Rome to learn more details about the ruling. It was clear to all that after a long struggle lasting 2 decades, justice had finally been done.
I have met so many people, victims who have some to give evidence, who ask me, is it really worth it? Well, I think it's always worth fighting for. The outcome may not be perfect, but you don't get anything if you don't fight for it.
The case began in 1999. 20 years later, it has ended with these life sentences for murder against political and military leaders. They will also have to pay legal costs and damages to the relatives and organizations who have fought so long to win this result.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, protests in Nigeria force the National Assembly to close down. Don't go away. Welcome back to Telesur. At least 44 people, including a number of children, have been picked up from the middle of the Mediterranean Sea off Libya's coast. According to the humanitarian group CI, the Alan Kurdi migrant rescue ship was alerted to the plight of the migrants by Tunisian fishermen and a civilian search plane. CI also says a Maltese Navy ship is now on its way to take the people back to land. This is the second group of migrants rescued by the Alan Kurdi in the past week to be taken in by Malta. Nigeria's National Assembly was on lockdown after shots were fired nearby during clashes between police and Islamic movement protesters. Protesters demanded the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim Saksaki, who was arrested in 2015 for allegedly attempting to kill the army chief. Police say 2 officers have been shot and wounded, while 6 other lawmen were injured by individuals using clubs and stones. The police also says 40 protesters were arrested, but have not commented on allegations that 2 protesters were killed. More internet services have been restored across Sudan following a court order ending 5 weeks of a blockade imposed by the ruling military council. The internet was blocked after a deadly crackdown on protesters camping outside the army headquarters in the capital, Khartoum. 2 weeks ago, a lawyer who challenged the internet blackout won his case, but services were restored for him alone until several people complained. The move comes days after the country's military reached an agreement with opposition leaders to share power until elections are held in 3 years' time.
Until now, it's not clear who ordered to cut the internet, and I have a lot of evidence that contradicts the statements made by the telecommunication body and the military council, which denied having any relation to this matter. Also, until now, no one has taken any responsibility of shutting down the internet.
In a candid speech on South Sudan's Independence Day, President Salva Kiir has apologized for the failures of his government. Kiir has said the civil war in 2013 has led to very serious financial challenges for South Sudan. He added that he is fully aware that people are angry due to difficult living conditions imposed by insecurity and economic hardship. South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011, but was shattered following the start of its own civil war in 2013. Egypt says it is set to file a civil suit in the UK over the sale of a Tutankhamun bust last week. The sculpture of the pharaoh was bought for $6 million at Christie's auction, despite Egypt warning it was probably stolen in the 1970s. However, Christie's says all necessary checks were made over the bust's origin and that its sale was legal and valid. The 3,000-year-old bust was part of a statue of the god Amun, and the facial features were same as those of the young pharaoh. The United Nations has commended African leaders for establishing the world's biggest free trade initiative. The United Nations Deputy Secretary General said the African Continental Free Trade Area was an integral move towards self-reliance. The African Union launched the world's largest free trade zone, while other world trade treaties are proving to be a failure. The United States has ditched the Trans-Pacific Partnership, while across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is trying to extract itself from the European Union and its single market.
I think with the CFTA, that slog to get countries on board, the implications for actually producing the largest trade area, and it producing possibilities for us to now address internally as well as externally what you need to do to make that happen. So, you know, with Nigeria, Benin coming in at the end yesterday, Eritrea saying, you know, we're not going to be left behind, I think you have a continent on the move.
South Africa is set to help Zimbabwe overcome its power shortage crisis. Zimbabwe is struggling to generate enough energy to meet demand due to reduced water levels in Lake Kariba, the country's main power generating source. Just recently, the country managed to clear its outstanding debt with the South African power company Eskom. The South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, held talks with the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, on the sidelines of the recent Africa Union meeting in Niger, where he expressed willingness to help in solving the power crisis.
Mnangagwa and I had a wonderful bilateral meeting where we discussed a variety of matters, and one of those was energy, because Zimbabwe has a shortage of energy at this point in time. They draw quite a lot of their energy from the Kariba Dam. Now they have been going through a massive drought, and the Kariba Dam water levels have gone terribly low, and so they need more energy. And as a result, they would like, obviously, South Africa to support them, but they have also been able to pay up the debt that they owed to Eskom. He confirmed that, and he said they would like, obviously, further support. And this is the type of thing that we are going to discuss with Eskom, because we've always exported energy to Zimbabwe and indeed to other neighboring countries.
South Africa's public broadcaster is struggling to stay on air. The government has been stalling on its promise for cash injection to ensure the broadcaster can pay employee salaries and provide a service for millions of South Africans. Our correspondent Matuba Madlachi has a story.
The SABC is our eyes, our ears, and the mouthpiece of our nation. I think TV and radio are an important part of building communities, and that's why paying your TV.
The South African government is the major shareholder of the SABC, and without its support, the broadcaster cannot carry out its mandate or even pay employee salaries. Communications Minister says she's not convinced the SABC has a sound turnaround strategy.
A responsive turnaround strategy that must give confidence not only to advertisers, not only to people who are listening to SABC, but to government and everyone, that in the next 5 years or 3 years, SABC will not come back and ask for a bailout.
A union representative for workers told a panel discussion on SABC News that government is being disingenuous in its approach to the crisis.
The state, as the main shareholder, cannot keep us at ransom, because that's exactly what they are doing now. Last month we were complaining whether the salaries will come or not. We have not paid critical stakeholders like Santrich, like your electricity bills and so forth. That shows that somehow SABC might be pressured to comply with whatever, that we're not so sure what it is.
Another panelist believes the SABC is being manipulated into political pressure.
You know, it's been allowed deliberately to stay in a lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis to serve very narrow political ends. And this is the consequence of that, is that it hasn't been able to develop.
Every passing day means growing uncertainty for the SABC and its employees. If the SABC is forced into a blackout, it will mean information cannot reach millions who can't afford pay TV channels. Matuba Madlachi, Telesur, Johannesburg.
Coming up after the break, the UK government bars Russian outlets from attending a conference on press freedom. Don't go away. Welcome back to Telesur English. Russian news agencies RT and Sputnik have been denied accreditation by the UK government for the Global Conference for Media Freedom in London after the UK accused them of spreading disinformation. The Russian Foreign Affairs Office has condemned this decision by the UK government and has demanded they provide concrete facts for their claims within 24 hours. Besides the claims by the UK's Foreign Office, the conference media accreditation team has not yet provided a concrete evidence to support their claims. Promoted by the UK and Canadian governments, the Global Conference for Media Freedom is set to start on Wednesday and claims to defend media freedom and improve the safety of journalists who report across the world. A massive police operation took place in Turkey on Tuesday as the prosecutor's office handed down 176 warrants for current members of the armed forces who were supposedly involved in the July 2016 coup against President Erdogan. Our correspondent in Istanbul, Aitor Chavarri, has more.
On Tuesday, Turkish police began an operation at the request of the Turkish prosecutor's office to arrest 211 active soldiers for their alleged links to the failed July 2016 coup attempt of here in Turkey. The petition arrived from the Istanbul prosecutor's office and accused these 211 people of having links with Fethullah Gulen, the Islamic preacher, which the government of Erdogan accuses of being the intellectual author of the failed coup attempt. The majority of people arrested come from the army, and among those arrested, there are several high-ranking officers. Since 2016, the Turkish government has pursued all people who have had links with Fethullah Gulen, since his group is considered as a terrorist group here in Turkey.
The Spanish prosecutor's office has demanded that Catalan President Quim Torra be barred from office for disobeying an order to remove a banner from the Catalan government building bearing the message, "Free political prisoners." President Torra did not remove the banner referring to the imprisoned leaders of the Catalan sovereignty movement at the first instance as ordered by the Spanish Electoral Commission. The magistrate said that Torra continued to disobey. It says it will seek to impose a fine of nearly $35,000. The president's defense team said the court was not impartial. New Greek government ministers have been appointed after the victory of the right-wing New Democracy Party in the country's general election. The party of the new Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis won the election on a platform of privatization and cutting regulation. However, many analysts say that the previous leftist Syriza government lost because it promised so much but failed to deliver.
People have high expectations of the Kyriakos Mitsotakis government. We're very confident we're going to work very hard to deliver. There is no time to lose. We need to rebuild the Greek economy, and that will be our top priority. Thank you.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.